In the cold silence of space, where stars burn eternal and dreams drift like dust, humanity once believed they were alone. They built towers that touched the clouds, sent voices across oceans, and painted their hopes on the canvas of the moon. But on a quiet Tuesday morning, when children laughed in schoolyards and lovers whispered promises, the sky turned dark with shadows that did not belong to clouds. Commander Daniel Foster had seen many things in his 30 years of service. He'd watched rockets fail and astronauts weep. He'd held the hands of dying men and promised their families he would never forget their names. But nothing in his long, weathered life had prepared him for this sight. Now, filling the observation deck of the Prometheus space station were ships, hundreds of them, emerging from a tier in space near Jupiter. They moved without sound, without hesitation, a silent swarm descending upon a golden field of wheat. Lieutenant Sophie Durand stood beside him, her reflection ghostly in the reinforced glass. She was young, barely 32, with dark hair tied back in a way that spoke of efficiency and sleepless nights. Her father had died on the first Mars mission, and she had joined the fleet to finish what he started. Now she watched as everything her father dreamed of was threatened by forces beyond imagination. "How many ships, Sophie?" Daniel asked. His voice was calm, but his hands trembled slightly at his sides. Sophie checked her tablet 3 times before answering. "At current count, we have 417 confirmed vessels. They are still arriving through the anomaly near Europa. Based on trajectory analysis, they will form a complete sphere around Earth within 6 hours." Daniel nodded slowly. He had received the transmission from the alien fleet 20 minutes ago. It had been cold and precise, delivered in perfect English with no accent and no emotion. The message was simple. Earth was being quarantined. Humanity had been judged as dangerous, unpredictable, and unsuitable for galactic society. They would be contained until they proved otherwise, or until they ceased to exist. No ships would leave the atmosphere. No signals would escape the barrier. Earth was to become a prison, floating in the endless dark. In Geneva, the World Security Council gathered in a chamber built for diplomacy, not war. President Helena Ortiz of the United European States sat at the head of the table, her gray eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the alien fleet in terrible detail. Beside her, General Viktor Petrov of the Eastern Alliance drummed his fingers against his knee, a nervous habit he'd carried since childhood. Across from them, Prime Minister Yuki Tanaka of the Pacific Federation studied a tablet filled with military reports that offered nothing but despair. "Our combined forces number less than 50 operational spacecraft," Victor said quietly. "Their smallest vessel is larger than our most powerful battleship. Direct confrontation would be suicide." Helena leaned forward, her silver hair catching the light. "Then we must find another way. Humanity has never surrendered to impossible odds. We did not cross oceans in wooden ships by accepting that the horizon was the end of the world. We did not walk on the moon by agreeing that gravity would always hold us down." Yuki looked up from her tablet. "The alien transmission mentioned that they have been observing us for centuries. They know our weapons, our tactics, our psychology. What advantage could we possibly have against an enemy that understands us so completely?" Helena smiled, but there was steel behind it. "They understand our history. They understand our patterns. But they do not understand our hearts. They see aggression where we see determination. They see chaos where we see creativity. That is our advantage. Prime Minister, we are unpredictable because we do not accept limits that others place upon us. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, in a facility that existed on no official map, Dr. Benjamin Okafor stared at equations that had consumed the last decade of his life. He was 54, with kind eyes and hands that shook from too much coffee and not enough sleep. His wife had left him 3 years ago, tired of competing with numbers and dreams she could not touch. His daughter had stopped calling, unable to forgive him for missing her wedding while chasing theories that everyone said were impossible. But now, as alien ships darkened the skies above his hidden laboratory, Benjamin allowed himself a moment of bitter satisfaction. Project Horizon had been dismissed by every major scientific institution as fantasy. The idea of folding space, of creating doorways between distant points without crossing the distance between them, had been rejected as science fiction dressed in mathematical clothing. But Benjamin had never stopped believing. Dr. Okafor, his assistant, called from across the lab. Clara Reyes was 28, brilliant, and possessed of a stubborn optimism that Benjamin had tried and failed to crush. The quantum field generators are showing stable readings for the first time since we started this project. I think we might actually be able to open a passage. Benjamin walked to her station, his heart pounding. On the screen before them, numbers danced in patterns that should have been impossible. The barrier those ships are creating, he said slowly. It blocks conventional space travel. But what if we could step outside of conventional space entirely? Clara looked at him with wide eyes. You mean create a tunnel through folded spacetime? Skip past their barrier entirely? Benjamin nodded. They built a wall around our house, Clara, but they forgot that humans have been digging tunnels since we lived in caves. We do not need to go through their barrier. We need to go under it. Above them, unseen and uncaring, the alien fleet completed its formation. A shimmering field of energy connected each ship to the next, forming a perfect sphere around Earth. Satellites went dark. Communication systems failed. For the first time in human history, the sky became a cage. But in laboratories hidden beneath mountains, in basement workshops where dreamers refused to surrender, and in the hearts of 8 billion people who had never learned how to accept defeat, something stirred. It was small at first, just a whisper of defiance, a spark of stubborn hope. The aliens had studied humanity for centuries. They had calculated every variable, predicted every response, and prepared for every strategy. They believed they understood the species they had come to contain. They were wrong. This was not the end. This was the beginning of a war, fought not with weapons, but with ingenuity. A war fought in the shadows of science and the depths of the human spirit. The cage was locked. The key was lost. But humanity had always been good at breaking things, and they were about to break the rules of physics itself. From the ashes of their isolation, they would forge a new path to the stars, a path their jailers would never see coming. The quarantine of Earth had begun, but so had the escape, and the galaxy would soon learn that you should never, ever underestimate a species that dreams. For 14 days, the shadow of the alien fleet hung over the Earth. 14 days of silence from the heavens, where our satellites once sang their electronic songs. All across the world, children asked their parents when the bad ships would leave, and parents, holding them close, whispered lies about a better tomorrow. But deep beneath the Earth, in hidden places where hope refused to die, humanity was preparing its answer. Commander Daniel Foster hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since the blockade began. His eyes were red, his uniform wrinkled, but his mind was as sharp as a freshly forged blade. He stood now in a chamber carved from solid granite, 300 meters beneath the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by the brightest minds humanity had secretly gathered. Dr. Benjamin Okafor pointed to a holographic display, a web of glowing lines connecting points across the globe. We call it the Rabbit Network, he explained. 7 facilities, each equipped with quantum tunneling technology. Individually, none of them can generate enough power to breach the alien barrier. But together, working in perfect synchronization, they can open a passage large enough to send a strike team through folded space. General Viktor Petrov, his weathered face skeptical, crossed his arms. And where exactly would this passage open? Benjamin touched the display, zooming in on a specific point near the alien command vessel. Their flagship sits at the northern pole of their formation. Our analysis suggests it's the primary control node for the entire barrier system. If we can disable it, even temporarily, we create a window for a larger offensive. Sophie Durand stepped forward, clutching her tablet. I've been studying their communication patterns for 2 weeks, she said. They use a quantum encryption system that should be unbreakable. But I noticed something strange. Every 72 hours, there's a brief gap in their signal coherence. It lasts only 90 seconds. During that window, their internal communications become vulnerable. Daniel looked at her with renewed respect. You found a weakness in their system? Sophie nodded. They're so confident in their technology, they never expected anyone to look for flaws. Their arrogance is our opportunity. Meanwhile, in Buenos Aires, Rosa Mendez was painting a picture of her grandmother when the knock came. Rosa was 35, a former combat pilot who'd left the military after a crash. A crash that left scars on her hands and nightmares in her sleep. For 3 years, she had tried to forget the feeling of falling through flames, of metal screaming as it tore itself apart. The man at her door wore no uniform, but she recognized the look in his eyes. It was the same look she once carried, before fear had taught her its bitter lessons. Captain Mendez, he said quietly, I'm here to ask if you would be willing to fly one more time. Rosa looked down at her hands, at the scars that still ached when the weather changed. I stopped being a captain when I stopped believing I deserved to survive. The man didn't argue. He simply handed her a folder, marked with security clearances she'd never seen before. Inside were blueprints for a spacecraft unlike anything she had ever imagined. We need pilots who understand that fear is not the enemy, the man said. We need pilots who know that courage means flying anyway. The mission is dangerous. The odds are terrible. But if we succeed, your grandmother will see a sky without shadows again. Rosa stared at the blueprints for a long time. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived a war of her own and taught her that the bravest thing a person could do was stand up after being knocked down. When do we start? She asked. Across the world, similar conversations were taking place. In Tokyo, a young engineer named Kenji Hayashi agreed to modify alien technology recovered from a crashed probe, knowing failure meant death. In Lagos, Dr. Amara Okonkwo left her research on renewable energy to help design weapons that could penetrate alien shields. In Moscow, twins named Dmitry and Natasha Volkov volunteered their skills as infiltration specialists, fully aware their chances of returning were almost zero. They came from different countries, spoke different languages, and carried different dreams. But they were united by something stronger than nationality or language. They were united by the refusal to accept that this was how their story would end. 3 weeks after the blockade began, Dr. Benjamin Okafor gathered his team for the final test. The quantum tunnel generator hummed with a power that made the air taste like copper and ozone. Monitors displayed readings that danced on the very edge of what physics should allow. Clara Reyes counted down from 10, her voice steady despite her racing heart. At 0, she pressed a button, channeling more energy through a single machine than most cities use in a year. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the air in front of them tore open like fabric, ripping along an invisible seam. A circle of light appeared, its edges crackling with energy that seemed to exist in colors that had no names. Through it, they could see stars that should have been blocked by the alien barrier. We did it, Clara whispered. We actually did it. Benjamin nodded, tears streaming down his face. He thought about his wife, who had called him a fool for chasing impossible dreams. He thought of his daughter, whose wedding he'd missed because he believed this moment would come. He thought of every scientist who had told him that space could not be folded, that the universe did not bend to human will. They were all wrong, he said softly. We found a door, but the celebration was short-lived. The tunnel flickered, then collapsed with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. Alarms screamed as systems overloaded. When the chaos settled, Clara pulled up the diagnostic data. "The passage was stable for 12 seconds, she reported. "That's enough to send a small team through, but it will take everything we have. We won't get a second chance." Daniel Foster, who had watched the test via secure communication, spoke into the silence. "Then we make the first chance count. Begin final preparations. We launch in 72 hours. High above, on the alien flagship, Commander Zorth of the Galactic Council reviewed reports with cold efficiency. The humans had behaved exactly as predicted. They had protested, threatened, tried to negotiate. Their world leaders had given speeches about freedom and defiance. Their populations had panicked, then settled into resigned despair. Everything followed the patterns the Council had observed across 300 quarantined species. "The blockade is proceeding without incident," Zoreth reported to the Council chamber. "Earth will be fully pacified within standard parameters. The humans have no capability to threaten our barrier. But far below, hidden from sensors that scanned for conventional technology, the Rabbit network powered up. Pilots climbed into spacecraft designed in secret, their hearts full of fear and hope in equal measure. Scientists said prayers to gods they weren't sure existed. Soldiers wrote letters to families they might never see again. And in a control room beneath the Alps, Benjamin Okoffer looked at the faces of those who had believed in him when belief seemed like madness. "We are about to attempt something that has never been done," he said. "We are going to punch a hole through the laws of physics and fly through it into the heart of an enemy fleet that outnumbers us 1,000 to 1. Every calculation says we should fail. Every piece of logic says this is suicide dressed in mathematics." He paused, and a smile crossed his tired face. "But we are human, and humans have never let logic stop us from attempting the impossible." The countdown began. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible tales from the edge of imagination. We'll see you in the next one. The quantum tunnel tore open a wound in reality, and through it, 12 spacecraft plunged into the heart of the alien formation. Rosa Mendez gripped her controls, her scarred hands steady now. Behind her, 19 other pilots held a perfect, desperate formation, their ships like fragile fireflies against the monstrous alien fleet. On the alien command bridge, Commander Zoreth's sensors screamed. It was impossible. Contacts had materialized inside their impenetrable barrier, a region of space no one should have reached. For the first time in centuries, Zoreth felt a jolt of pure surprise. "All vessels can gauge the intruders," he commanded, his voice tight. How did they breach the barrier? There was no answer. The humans had done what every model, every prediction, every cold calculation said they could not. They had broken the rules of the universe. Rosa dove toward the alien flagship, her engines screaming at maximum power. Blinding flashes of energy weapons lit up the void, a deadly, beautiful light show. 2 ships in her formation vanished in silent balls of fire, then 3 more. The voices of her dying friends crackled over the radio, but she didn't slow down. "I know you're afraid," she broadcast to her remaining pilots. "I'm afraid too. But our fear doesn't matter. What matters is that somewhere down on Earth, children are looking up at the sky, waiting for us to bring them their tomorrow." She remembered her grandmother's words, spoken years ago in a kitchen that smelled of fresh bread and coffee. "When everything seems impossible, Rosa, that is when you discover what you are truly made of. Not before, not after. In the moment when giving up makes the most sense is when giving up becomes the one thing you must not do." The alien flagship loomed before her, a mountain of metal dwarfing anything humanity had ever built. Its shields pulsed with enough energy to power continents, but they had a secret. The brilliant scientist Sophie Durand had found its weakness, and Rosa carried the key. She fired. The disruption charge was a tiny spark against the colossal ship, but it carried something more powerful than any explosive. It carried human ingenuity, distilled into a packet of quantum interference that spoke the alien system's own language. The flagship's shields flickered. Then they failed. Chaos erupted throughout the alien fleet. The barrier that had imprisoned Earth began to shimmer and fade as the flagship's control system scrambled to reboot. From Prometheus Station, Commander Daniel Foster's voice rang out, the words 8 billion people had been praying for. All Earth Defense Forces, this is Commander Foster. The barrier is down. All ships, engage at will. This is our moment. Make it count. From hidden bases on every continent, spacecraft surged into the sky. They were outnumbered, outgunned, armed with weapons that should have been useless. But the shields were failing, the aliens were confused, and humanity poured through the gap with the fury of a caged species finally breaking free. General Viktor Petrov led the Eastern Fleet into the fray over Europe. Prime Minister Yuki Tanaka coordinated Pacific forces striking above Asia. From Geneva, President Helena Ortiz watched the battle for humanity's fate unfold across the globe. The aliens fought back with terrifying power. For every one of their vessels that fell, 3 human ships were destroyed. The void filled with debris, with fire, with the last screams of brave souls giving everything for a chance at a new day. Rosa Mendez weaved through the heart of the battle, her ship battered but still flying. She'd lost count of how many times death had brushed past her. Her fuel was nearly gone, her weapons spent. But she was alive, and as long as she was alive, she would not stop fighting. Then she saw it. A gap in the alien formation, just large enough for a single ship to reach the flagship's exposed reactor core. It was a suicide run. No pilot could make that approach and survive. She didn't hesitate. As she dove toward the reactor, she thought of everyone she loved. Her grandmother, who taught her that courage wasn't the absence of fear. Her friends who had fallen beside her. The children on Earth who deserved a future where the sky held only stars. "This is Captain Rosa Mendez," she said into her radio, her voice calm. "It has been an honor to fly with all of you. Tell my grandmother I finally understood what she meant." She hit the reactor at full speed. The explosion was visible from Earth. It lit up the night sky like a second sun as the alien flagship broke apart. Without its central command, the alien fleet lost all coordination. Their formation scattered. Their remaining shields failed. And humanity, battered and bleeding but unbroken, pressed their advantage. The battle raged for 6 more hours. When it ended, the remnants of the alien fleet were retreating through the wormhole near Jupiter, their ships crippled, their confidence shattered. Commander Zorath sent one final transmission as his flagship fled. His voice, for the first time, held a note of respect. "You have proven us wrong," he said. "The Council will need to reconsider its assessment of your species. We came to contain you, but we failed to understand what we were trying to contain. Perhaps we will meet again, humans. Perhaps next time, as equals." The wormhole closed. Earth's sky was clear. A month later, a memorial was built in Geneva. Rosa Mendez's name was carved in stone alongside thousands of others. Her grandmother was there, leaning on a cane, her tears a mix of grief and pride. Benjamin Okafor stood before the world's leaders. "We have proven something today," he said, "not just to the aliens, but to ourselves. The only prison that can truly hold humanity is the one we build in our own minds. When we refuse to accept limits, there is nothing in this universe that can keep us down." Sophie Durand returned to her research, now studying the stars with a new purpose. Humanity had announced itself to a galaxy full of unknown friends and foes. Commander Foster retired and spent his years teaching young officers about leadership and about the battle for Earth. But his favorite story was always about Rosa Mendez. "Courage," he would say, "is not about being fearless. It's about being terrified and still moving forward. That is what makes us human. That is what the aliens never understood. In the years that followed, as humanity reached for the stars, they carried the lessons of the blockade with them. They remembered that strength comes from the hearts of ordinary people who refuse to surrender. They remembered that the greatest walls can be broken by those who believe there is something worth fighting for on the other side. The universe was vast and dangerous, yes, but it was also full of wonder. And as long as there were people like Rosa Mendez, willing to dream and sacrifice in hope against all odds, the story of humanity would never truly end. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next journey into the unknown.